Tommy Jaggi of FanSided here with NFL expert Marcus Mosher to talk about moves that teams can make around the NFL. Marcus, we are nearing the end of the 2025 season. We've got an offseason ahead of us that should be filled with excitement. New quarterbacks for some of these teams out there, new coaches. We'll talk about the biggest decisions that every non-playoff team should make. And we'll start kind of at the bottom of the list here, Marcus. I want to kick it over with the New York Giants. We'll close out with some of the teams that were closer to making the playoffs this year, but didn't quite get there. So New York Giants, Marcus, they've got a lot of issues going on. Obviously, had to run with an interim head coach this year after getting rid of Brian Daboll. It looks like they have their quarterback in place, at least the one that they're going to run with for a little while now. Hopefully, Jaxson Dart can stay healthy. But where do they go from here? What is the biggest thing that this franchise needs to do in the 2026 offseason?
They got to find the right head coach. The Jaxson Dart pick, development, none of that's going to matter unless they find the right head coach to develop him. And you look at the history of the Giants head coaches, it's really rough. I mean, with Brian Daboll, you had Joe Judge mixed in there. It was a couple of years ago, it was Pat Schumer, it was Steve Spagnuolo, Ben McAdoo. Like, they just haven't found that guy to kind of get them out of the bottom of the NFC East. And unfortunately, Tommy, for them, this is not the best coaching cycle. There's not a Ben Johnson. There's not a Liam Cohen. So you're either going to have to go with like some retread guys like Steve Spagnuolo, maybe he comes back. Maybe you go with a Mike McCarthy that could help develop Jaxson Dart. But until they get that coach, it's going to be really hard for this Giants team to be competitive in the NFC.
Yeah, there's no question that that's the big thing. Like, that is what the Giants have to do to try to fix this franchise. They've gone through that cycle for so long since Tom Coughlin. They got to find a guy now who can stick around for a while. I happen to know one in Pittsburgh, Marcus, a certain Mike Tomlin, who not happening. He's not going anywhere. Steelers did too well again this season. But you're right there. If there was a secondary one, I would say trade back in the draft, just because you have your quarterback in place now. You've got good edge rushers. They have some pretty good pieces to build around overall, but you got to start filling in the holes now. There's just too many roster holes on this Giants team. It's why they are going to finish probably with one of the worst records in the NFL this year. But you talked about it, fixing the head coaching gap right there. Had they done it last year, again, you talked about that pool last year with Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel and just so many more guys to pick from. We'll see who emerges from this, because there are a few guys that I really like. And if they want to go with another offensive mind, like Clint Kubiak is my favorite probably, that's going to be hitting the cycle this year. And I think that he should be getting a head coaching job. But we'll see. Either way, head coach is what Giants need to fix more than anything else in the 2026 offseason. Marcus, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders here. Just a nightmare of a football team in 2025. Expectations were much higher for this team. We knew that they were heading into a tough division in the AFC West over there, but they just fell short in every single area: offense, defense, coaching, obviously. And so my number one thing that the Raiders would need to do, Marcus, fire Pete Carroll. You cannot go another season with a, 74-year-old head coach. Like, it's just not working. He's not up to speed with the game anymore. That's very clear at this point. I think that they made some really short-sighted moves that they had no business making last year's draft, taking a running back early in Ashton Genty, who has failed as a rookie, quite frankly, and it's not his fault. He just didn't have the pieces around him. Marcus, do you agree that firing Pete Carroll is the biggest move the Raiders need to make, or is there something else?
No, I mean, to me, that's almost a given at this point. They've been so bad, and it starts with some of the hires that Pete Carroll had with Chip Kelly, Patrick Graham, who's their defensive coordinator. I think he's the only guy doing a good job right now. Pete Carroll brought his son to be the offensive line coach, and that's been awful. I would expect the Raiders to move on from Pete Carroll, but I think more than anything, it's who is running this team, because Tom Brady has been one of the guys that's been very vocal about going out and getting Pete Carroll, going out and getting Chip Kelly. The Raiders were going to sign Sam Darnold in free agency, and Tom Brady nixed it. He said, no, that we don't want Darnold. I don't think he's a very good quarterback. Instead, they trade for Geno Smith. That's been a disaster. He wanted them to go out and get Kenny Pickett. if you're going to let Brady run this team, I have some major concerns. Maybe you just let Spytek, the current GM, build it to his vision. But I just have some major doubts that Tom Brady actually knows how to put together a competent franchise, because every move that he's made this offseason has been a disaster. He thought that the offensive line was going to be good enough, that they would be able to coach up that unit. That's why they drafted Ashton Genty, and it's been a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, if Brady really is making the calls and these decisions here, then he has to step back, because everything the Raiders have done recently has not worked out. And I think that's I agree with you. I think that they need to hand over the reins. It's got to start with Pete Carroll, though. Like that to me, you get a new head coach in there, more innovation. Like what is the NFL telling us around the league right now? It's kind of a league of trends, Marcus. And if you were to rank like the top 15, 18 head coaches in the NFL, you might have one or two defensive minds in there. And they're younger guys with Vrabel and DeMeco Ryans. The rest of these guys are young, innovative guys who can call an offense. That is the opposite of what Pete Carroll does. And so I think they absolutely need to get a new coach in there. Obviously, their problems don't stop with a head coach. No. They need a coaching staff. They need better direction. They need more talent on their roster, just about as bad as any team in the league. But I think it starts with Pete Carroll. And
I don't think trying to recreate the Patriots way in Las Vegas is going to work, because you don't have Tom Brady at quarterback. And they've tried this before with Josh McDaniels, and it went very poorly. And I'm sure that's what Tom Brady's going to try to do, is get one of his former guys to be the head coach there. I think you're just asking for trouble doing that.
And do they roll with Geno Smith, Marcus, starting quarterback for another year?
I mean, he's under contract at a fairly reasonable contract. My guess is the Raiders are going to end up with one of the top two picks. They're going to be drafting a quarterback, and we're probably going to get a new head coach, new quarterback pairing in Las Vegas.
All right, Marcus, let's talk about the Tennessee Titans now, who owned the number one pick in the 2025 draft. They obviously took quarterback Cam Ward out of Miami. And Ward has played some pretty nice games overall. You can see what there is to work with there. Really good, scrambling outside the pocket, making some plays down the field. There's something to work with. Obviously, they're not going to go out and draft another quarterback next year. Now it's about building around Cam Ward. And Marcus, I think that their priority number one, and they, again, a plethora of issues. You're talking about a bad football team overall, but their number one thing should be to go out and get Ward a bona fide weapon in that offense. The last thing you can afford to do with a young quarterback is ruining him by not putting enough talent around him. Do you agree or disagree?
I mean, I agree. That's the biggest move on the roster. Like, they just don't have that guy. And honestly, they're sitting at a pretty good spot. This is a good receiver class. It's not a great free agent class, but I do think it's a good receiver class in the draft. I think they'll be able to get one, but it's much like the Giants situation. They're going to have a new head coach this year. They've already fired, the Callahan. They're going to get a new guy. And we've seen in these quarterbacks, getting the right head coach can make all the difference in the world. Look at Drake May. Last year in 2024 as a rookie, Drake May, 15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. The passer rating was well below NFL average. You get Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator, you get Mike Vrabel as the head coach, and now you're talking about an MVP caliber candidate. Same with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams played some really rough football as a rookie, and now the Bears have a chance to be the number 1 or number 2 seed in the NFC. The Titans have to get that right guy to help develop Cam Ward. I would like to see them go after more of a veteran guy, somebody like a Mike McCarthy that has a bunch of skins on the wall. I know that's not the most exciting or appealing, but they've got to get somebody in here that knows what they're doing in order to get this team off the ground.
Yeah, get out of the basement first, at least, and see what a coach can do for you in that regard. And I probably should have led with that, Marcus, because
you're right.
Have the worst coaching situation.
Yeah, receiver's a big issue. Yeah,
it is. It is a big issue, and so obviously they need a collection of things. Those I would call the two biggest as well. But like the Giants, also got rid of their head coach midseason. Huge need for them. I agree completely. You are tuned into Stacking the Box, where NFL fans come to talk, celebrate, debate. For more coverage, hit up fansided.com. Powered by the passionate fans at FanSided. All right, Marcus, fun topic here. Cleveland Browns. regardless of what they do, this franchise, even when it seems like they've got talented rosters, they can never pull it together, and they always fall short of expectations. Somehow they've gone through a collection of quarterbacks. We can debate all day long whether they should have just kept Baker Mayfield, their former number 1 overall pick, and rode out the highs and lows with him, dealing with that shoulder injury and the things that he had going on back in Cleveland. Way past that at this point. Deshaun Watson not going to play quarterback for this team anymore. Shedeur Sanders has had some nice big throws down the field, but my goodness, he does not look like an NFL quarterback on a snap-by-snap basis. Is quarterback the biggest issue, Marcus, for the Browns, and how do they fix that?
Yes, I think it is. I think the only question I have about Cleveland is if they're ready to draft a quarterback. And what I mean by that is you look at this offensive line, one of the worst in the league. Joel Bitonio, their left guard, he might retire this offseason. They don't have either long-term tackle option. They don't have a number 1 receiver. I think Jerry Jeudy is going to be released this offseason. And then on top of that, I'm not sure Kevin Stefanski is the right guy to develop that quarterback. I think Stefanski is really good at turning average quarterbacks and getting them to play at an above average level. We looked at Joe Flacco a couple of years ago in that offense, Jacoby Brissett, Jameis Winston, but I'm not sure he's the right guy to develop these quarterbacks. So do you take these 2 first-round picks that they have, rebuild the offensive line, and then consider drafting a quarterback into the future? Or do you draft a Fernando Mendoza and put him into a really, really bad situation and kind of have him try to fight his way out of it? I don't know. But I think I would lean to fixing the current offensive line coach situation before I do anything else.
I guess it comes down to me, Marcus. How much do they believe in Mendoza? I really like him as a prospect. I think that he's got the leadership, the traits that you want, everything to be able to hang in there and be that guy for a long time, potentially better than the quarterback that they've experienced maybe in their history. Like the bar is so low that it's you can go back decades. But if not, at least the 2027 class does look encouraging at the quarterback position because of the names that are going back in, some of the guys that might be available in 2027. The outlook changes so fast. The landscape changes. But the offensive line, it's important to get that build up as well. I just don't know. Can the Browns and their fan base, they've done it for so long, but can they go another year with just nothingness at quarterback? Or Marcus, would you, if those are your choices, would you prefer to say, okay, let's rebuild the offensive line, and we're just going to go with a bridge quarterback, a 1-year bridge before we draft one the following year?
Well, no, the truth is they already have the bridge on the roster. They have Deshaun Watson. If they want to play Watson, that's obviously not a great situation. But you also have 2 young quarterbacks in Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. And maybe you just go into next season with those guys as your quarterbacks. I like Mendoza a lot, but I think he is in the Matt Ryan, Jared Goff level of quarterback where he can move a little bit, but you need to protect him. Mm-hmm. He would have no shot behind this offensive line right now, none. And you're just setting your quarterback up for failure. I think Cleveland could do that, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Cleveland's more interested in Dante Moore, who's a little bit more mobile, who can escape a little bit. That might be a better situation for their current setup.
Yeah, and all the quarterbacks that have just kind of that 1-year sample are always a little bit worrisome. I feel a little bit safer about Mendoza, but more obviously an option there. Let's talk about another team who needs a quarterback, and that is the New York Football Jets, who just a dumpster fire again this year. They experimented with Justin Fields. That went south very quickly. Head coaching situation is a mess. How do you hire a defensive-minded head coach and just have a pitiful defense that can't seem to take the ball away or do anything right? That's the state of the Jets with Aaron Glenn. My biggest priority, if I was the Jets, Marcus, would be head coach. I know it was just a 1-year sample, but I'm one and done with Glenn. I didn't see anything to get excited about there. I didn't even like his responses to the media. I think that they need to hit the reset button and say, yeah, we made a mistake. Let's go and try this again. Maybe bring in a young offensive mind this time. You can't continue on down this track, even though they are also in desperate need of a quarterback.
And I'm with you. I don't think Aaron Glenn has shown enough to keep his job. At the same time, tell me the coach in this cycle that, just blows your socks off, because I think that's what's going to happen to a lot of these teams is they're going to look at Aaron Glenn. They're not going to love it, but they're not necessarily going to love all of the options out there either. And we know that the Jets aren't going to be the first priority for some of the top tier candidates. So is it worth firing an Aaron Glenn for like Arthur Smith, who a lot of people believe is like a top 5 candidate in this cycle? Is it worth it firing Aaron Glenn for a Clayton Adams or something like that? I don't know. I probably would move on from Glenn, but I also see the dilemma here.
Yeah, and it's hard to, if you don't think that Glenn is the guy, I think you have to move on. I don't think you can say, well, we'll just do it for another year, because then he'll have his hands in the decision-making process and be involved in front office decisions. And I just don't think that that's the right way to go to build the defense into his image there, when you know that he's not the guy, or at least you should probably know that he's not the guy. And maybe, Marcus, the answer is going with someone who would also call the defense. Man, Brian Flores, who can run an amoeba defense and at least trick opposing offensive coordinators and quarterbacks. And so you can get an upgrade there. And maybe this is where Flores would stick. I mean, he had showed success when he was in Miami. And so I think that that still needs to be priority number one. But like we said, it's about the coaching cycle. Who's going to be the names available? What direction do they want to go? I think it's obviously between finding a quarterback for the long term for the Jets, who, again, at least they have better pieces around their offensive line. They're more in a position to draft a quarterback. It's just, do you want to draft a quarterback and then find yourselves in a Jaxson Dart, Brian Dable situation where now we need to go and get a new head coach who is going to mesh with the quarterback we just drafted?
Really quickly before we move on, because this is a very important topic. I asked 5 different people who work in the NFL to give me their top 5 coaching candidates in this cycle, and I'll read them to you really quickly. It's Robert Saleh is the number 1 candidate. Well, obviously the Jets aren't doing that, right? It's Mike McCarthy, who we've mentioned. It's Joe Brady with Buffalo, who has been very, very much up and down. It's Cliff Kingsbury, who we've seen with the Cardinals before, and we saw how that kind of how that played out before. And then it's Jesse Minter, who is the defensive coordinator with the Chargers, who was kind of did the exact same thing that Aaron Glenn did with the Lions. He took a ragtag unit and made them, a viable option. I think you can see why some of these teams are just going to stick with what they have, because I don't think any of those names are all that intriguing.
Well, first of all, Marcus, I can say that my list does not in any way, shape, or form mirror that. I think that Saul is probably the only one who deserves to be on the top 5 if I were constructing a list. But I get what you're saying. The fact that there is no consensus, there is no Ben Johnson, there's no Mike Vrabel this year, I think that it shows you where teams are with that coaching cycle right now.
Well, and it's why I think Arthur Smith and like Vance Joseph are going to get jobs. And those guys have been head coaches before. It's went terribly wrong in the past, but there's just not that many good options.
I mean, as a Steelers fan too, Marcus, and I think Arthur Smith is fine. But it's wild to think that he might be one of the top head coaching candidates this year.
Yep. When
he had no success, 3 straight 7-10 seasons with the Falcons, and that's where we are right now. So let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals, a team that had a really bizarre season overall. Huge connection issues between Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr., and then Kyler gets pushed aside and Jacoby Brissett comes in and he has a record-breaking game with 47 completions, the most ever in NFL history, but he's obviously just a backup quarterback and they found no success with him. Is finding a quarterback the biggest issue, Marcus? And I would say the biggest thing you need to do, Kyler's not that guy. And they made that very clear with the decisions they've made. You have to trade Kyler Murray this offseason.
And I understand that. I do think they've probably run out on the Kyler experience. The issue is they went 2-3 with Kyler, and one of those games was that really weird game to the Titans where they blew a 20-point lead because of DeMarcado dropping the ball to goal line. I think they're 1-9 with Jacoby Brissett. Like, this is a team that just hasn't gotten any better, and they've really regressed on defense. And I think we're asking with Jonathan Gannon. Gannon's been there for, I think, 3 years now. And this is a team that has progressively gotten worse since they fired Cliff Kingsbury. So yeah, I agree. Like, it's probably time to reset the quarterback, get a rookie or get a bridge guy, kind of reset the roster. But unless you've got that guy installed as a head coach, I don't know if it really is going to matter.
And maybe Gannon is not that guy. However, I just don't think you can play another game with Kyler Murray there. I don't think the team is. They're not rallying behind him. And obviously Brissett's not the answer either. I mean, we want to stick around as a backup and come in a pinch again, but they need to go out and get a different bridge quarterback probably for now, because I'm not sure if they'll be in a good enough position to draft one of the top 2 signal callers in this draft. And if you're not doing that, you probably should just wait until next year anyway. But I would say Kyler needs to be gone. Start building your team around after that. See who's available out there. I don't like the options. I don't want to roll with a Tua Tagovailoa or anything. If when Dolphins move on from him, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But I think that it needs to start with Kyler being gone from that franchise at this point. Marcus, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints, who kind of made a little bit of a wave here in the second half of the season. They obviously had drafted a quarterback early in the second round last year in Tyler Shough, and he seems to have the tools and talent to maybe get excited about, even despite his age. But where do they go from here? I mean, this has just been a franchise that has kind of been in shambles for a while now. They've had some older players. They just need a new talent pool. And I think for the Saints, you look at how many needs they have overall, maybe just the biggest thing they can do this year is trade back in the draft for more picks.
Yeah, I think that would be very wise. This is a team that always could use more picks, although they don't really operate that way. With Mickey Loomis, they're always going to be aggressive. But Tommy, I look at the Saints and I look at the NFC South, and I think, man, it might not be that long before they're the team to beat. Think about their situation right now. You've got Chris Olave. He's going to get a long-term deal. You've got your tackle set up with Kelvin Banks, who's been awesome this year. You drafted Fuaga in 2024, I believe. You've got your tackles. You've got your interior offensive line set up. Tyler Shough's been really good over the last couple of weeks. You get like one more weapon in this offense. You get a couple guys in free agency on defense. Why couldn't the Saints be the best team in the NFC South like as soon as next year? I'm actually pretty optimistic about the Saints team moving forward.
The only reason I'm optimistic about them, Marcus, is because of the division they play in. If they were in most of the other divisions, I probably wouldn't be. But I get what you're saying, because New Orleans, as soon as next season, could be in contention to win their own division, host a playoff game. And so for that reason, maybe just getting Shough a weapon is the way to go. Maybe making sure he's got a bona fide number one that he can go to in that offense. But obviously this team, I just don't like the state of this team overall, what they've been in financially, in terms of their age. A lot of their players that they've had in recent years have been, their best players have been their oldest players. And we're starting to see that shift finally now. In some of the most pivotal pieces they have on offense are now their younger guys, even though Shough isn't technically very young. He's going to be 27 next year. But maybe this is the way to go in a weak division. Just get yourself into that race to be the top, and maybe that starts with getting a weapon for Shough next year.
It feels like they've kind of completed the rebuild the way that you want to do it. I mean, they've got 4 first-round picks on their offensive line. They've got a good receiver in Chris Olave. They've got an offensive-minded head coach, and by all metrics, it certainly seems like they've hit on a young quarterback. Like, this is the situation that you want to be in. You've got a young quarterback under contract. You've got the pieces on offense. It just won't surprise me if they're one of these teams where you and I, we get to June and we see that their win total is like 9.5, and we're wondering how in the world is it that number? Well, it feels like they're kind of doing things the right way for the first time in a long time.
I agree. You're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel for this team that really hasn't been good or competitive since like the Drew Brees era. All right, from the highs, the heartbreaks, the headlines, everything in between. This is the Stacking the Box podcast, your source for NFL talk, powered by FanSided and the voices at FanSided. Make sure you're coming back every week for more fresh content here on Stacking the Box. All right, Marcus, let's talk about the Washington Commanders now. A team that I think a lot of folks were optimistic about after watching them, get 12 wins together last year, win a playoff game. They looked really good. And then all of a sudden, things changed really fast. Oldest roster in the NFL. Your second-year quarterback can't stay healthy. Had the elbow injury after running through some other stuff this year. The one thing they have to do, Marcus, you can't have a dirt old roster and expect to be competitive anymore. It's a mistake my Pittsburgh Steelers make. They do it all the time. Washington does it worse than anybody else. And maybe that starts with Dan Quinn. Maybe we say, okay, we need to have a serious discussion about Dan Quinn now. It's time to hit the road. But you've got to get younger as an organization.
100% agree. This was our biggest concern about this Commanders team going into the year. It seemed like they tried to microwave this, this rebuild after, kind of unexpectedly going to the NFC Championship game. And they bet on a lot of old players, including like Von Miller and Deebo Samuel and Marshawn Lattimore and Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu and Eddie Goldman and Javon Kinlaw. I mean, we could go on and on and on. They've got to get younger. And you're seeing it now in the second half of this season. They look incredibly slow on both sides of the ball. I think the offensive line could use some upgrades, but more than anything, they need to add more juice to the defensive line. Dorrance Armstrong is out for the year with a knee injury. I don't expect Von Miller or Preston Smith to be back. So get younger, get more explosive, and maybe you can contend for the NFC East title again.
Yeah, I mean, if this was like 8 years ago, they'd probably have the best roster in the NFL, but it doesn't work that way. And guys go downhill so fast. I feel at certain positions as well. When you hit your 30s, it can be some tough sledding the rest of the way. So just roster revamp, get young. You have a young, really promising quarterback in Jaden Daniels, former rookie of the year, had a phenomenal rookie season. It's time to start building around him. And if that means that you got to get a little bit worse before you can get better, then so be it. But you're not going to find true success again until you build the roster around your franchise quarterback. So that's where they should be headed right now. Marcus, the Cincinnati Bengals have a bit of a different problem. They have a quarterback they've had for quite some time, one of the best in the league. You have got to make sure my priority, and I know that you might disagree with me on this one because the defense is pitiful. The defense is so bad. But Marcus, I would have one priority bigger than that. And that is making sure that my franchise quarterback, and honestly, if he could stay healthy, probably the best player in the history of this franchise, or most important, does not suffer a major injury again. Not a toe injury, not a knee injury. I don't want him getting hit. I would fix the offensive line with every resource I have and then worry about the defense, which is obviously horrendous. Do you disagree with that philosophy, Marcus?
I don't disagree with it in a vacuum, but I also think this Bengals offensive line has played a lot better than it has in previous years. And Burrow's injury this year wasn't a issue of like him getting hit too much. It was just kind of a fluke thing. I do think they could use some upgrades at like left guard. Dylan Fairchild has been pretty rough. Dalton Reisner's on a 1-year deal. I think the tackles for the most part have been fine. I think they could use more improvements there, but this defense, you want to take some of the pressure off
so
Joe.
Far away, yeah.
Yeah, well, if you want to take some of the pressure off Joe Burrow, where he's not having to drop back and throw the ball 45 times a game, get a better defense. Their linebackers are the worst linebackers I have ever seen play. It's an abomination how bad they are. Trey Hendrickson's a free agent. They didn't get a ton out of Shamar Stewart this year because of injury problems. Geno Stone has been awful. I think they need like 5 new starters on defense. You're obviously not going to get them all in the draft, but they've got to get this unit back to being a respectable group, because until then, they have no chance to compete in the AFC.
Marcus, somehow there's an avenue for the Bengals' defense to get worse next year. Maybe they don't have Trey Hendrickson.
Well, they haven't really had him all year, but yes, I mean,
that's true.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they've got to get out of the gutter on defense, no question. This team lives and dies by Joe Burrow, and when he's not there, it's another season down the tubes, and we've seen that too many times. So those are clearly the two big things. Make sure Burrow does not get injured again and start improving the league's worst defense, which they're not going to be true contenders again until you do those things.
And really quickly, I do think they can do it. They have about $75 million of cap space this offseason. They're going to have a top 15 pick. I don't think they're that far away from being average. Again, you get 2 or 3 guys. Maybe you upgrade the defensive coordinator if you don't think Al Golden's it. But I do think it can be done.
All right, Marcus, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons now, who have made strides in some areas. They've got some really young and encouraging skill players on the roster. They found some pass rushers that you can build around now. And so they're doing things the right way as well. They've got a pretty solid offensive line overall. Big questions about around like Michael Penix. Can he stay healthy? Is he the guy? We'll see moving forward. Couldn't stay healthy this season, obviously. But what is the biggest issue on the Atlanta Falcons going into the 2026 offseason?
I think it's Raheem Morris. I mean, Raheem Morris has shown us enough now in 2 stops with Atlanta and Tampa Bay I just don't think he's a very good head coach. And this offense has been very much up and down. We don't know the status of Michael Penix next year, who is coming off another ACL injury. At least Kirk Cousins has looked competent. But I just don't think Raheem Morris, who's a defensive-minded head coach, really has any idea what he's doing here. And I know the defense has had some moments this year where they've looked better. They don't have a first-round pick. But until you get that right guy on the sideline, it just feels like a team that's rudderless right now.
Yeah, in terms of importance, it's hard to argue for anything other than Raheem Morris being gone. We talked about the coaching cycle already. I mean, this roster is not void of holes. They could use another cornerback for sure. They're pretty young overall, which I think that's the part that's encouraging if you're a Falcons fan. But man, this team rode the roller coaster unlike any other team this year, where they'd have a few phenomenal showings and then a couple disastrous showings where it's like, you look like the worst team in football. And I think that starts with coaching, Marcus. I think that's where they could use a guy who at least gets them to set a certain floor every game where it's like, I'm at least going to be competitive. I'm not going to have these games where I'm just getting completely blown out 100%. Of the water. So I would agree. Raheem Morris should be on the chopping block this year for the Falcons. Miami Dolphins. This one could go a couple of different directions. If you talk to Dolphins fans, like some of them are just, they are so out on Mike McDaniel, which I know I don't have all the inside scoop, Marcus. I know I'm watching it not as a Dolphins fan, and so not being as close to the situation, but I really like the offense that McDaniel runs. I think that there are so many more deeply rooted issues. Tua is one of them. And so my number one would be that guy's got to go. And I know that this is going to be maybe the worst cap absorption that you can do in the history of the league. I think $99 million, like dead money that they might just have to take. You can't go another season with Tua as your quarterback. And maybe it's both. Maybe it's Tua gone and McDaniel gone. If I'm a team out there in need of an offensive play caller, I will scoop McDaniel up in seconds. Like, I think that at the very least, he can be a good OC, and maybe we're finding out he's not a legitimate head coach. But I think that the Tua problem is way worse than the McDaniel problem.
So this one's really complicated because I agree with you. I think it's time for Miami to move on from Tua. He just doesn't want to get hit anymore. There was a play against the Steelers, a 3rd and 2 run. He had a wide open middle of the field, just take off, run, get the first down. He slides a yard short of the first down because he doesn't want to get touched. He doesn't want any contact. And you just can't play football that way. He gets rid of the ball so quickly that you can't really throw the ball down the field. And he hasn't always played that way. It's because of the concussions that he's had to change his style. But you're right. Like this, you can't operate with Tua as your quarterback anymore. But what do you do? Right now, Miami is $10 million over the cap in 2026. You can't cut him because it would actually cost you $42 million. I mean, even trading him is going to cost you $11.5 million. And I don't see anybody taking on his salary. So it feels like they're just going to eat it, and he's going to either be a backup or a bridge starter. I don't know, Tommy, but I like Mike McDaniel just like you do. I think he's very innovative. I think he can really design a run game, and that's really his superpower. Mm-hmm. But there is something about this Dolphins team that they just lack toughness. And I don't know if it's because of where they play or their head coach, but they just can't compete in any of these games in cold weather. And McDaniel has not been able to compete without Tua. You look at his record without Tua, I think they're like 1-14 in these games. Like the offense completely bogs down. I do wonder if it's time for just the Dolphins to completely clean house. They've already fired the GM, get rid of the head coach, get rid of the offensive, or get rid of the quarterback and start over.
Man, this franchise is always going to be at such a disadvantage when it comes to those weather games. We've talked about that before. 12 straight losses when it's under 40 degrees, and that goes back before Mike McDaniel. And so it's not just a him problem. They haven't won a playoff game in 25 years, Marcus, because when you get into January and you have to go play in New England or Buffalo or Pittsburgh, and you're just at such a disadvantage if you don't get home field.
Now, but I will say that they have a big advantage early in the year where teams are not used to playing in that heat. And if you can get
it just doesn't matter as much because what matters is
right. But if you can get that home field advantage in the playoffs, there are going to be teams that aren't used to playing in the heat in January, but they haven't been able to do that. And that's why you've seen so many of the struggles. I do wonder if Miami should start thinking about building their team differently You're gonna be playing in the AFC East. You're gonna be playing in the AFC for the remainder of time. You better start building a team that can compete in those type of games.
And maybe that's where they need to go from here. The Tua thing is just a disaster, though. Like I would assume then, because of the contract we just outlined here, it's probably just going to end up being the most expensive backup in NFL history. And you hate to see it's such a high percentage of your cap go to a player that's not even going to be on the field. They've already turned the page on him. We'll see where they go from here, but not a good situation to be in at all. Marcus, a team that we did not think we would be talking about this season as one of the non-playoff teams and where they need to go from here in 2026, but the Kansas City Chiefs, boy, how the mighty have fallen extremely quickly. And even if you go back to their Super Bowl against the Eagles last year, where they just weren't even remotely competitive, and it's been bad for a while now. The offense has gone way down. Their talent pool has gone down. They're getting older. What does this team need to do? What's the biggest decision you would make if you're the Chiefs in 2026?
Decide whether you want to be competitive or not, because I think there's going to be a push for the Chiefs to look at Patrick Mahomes, who's going to be 31 next year, and feel like, okay, we're in the prime of his career. We know that he might miss a couple games, but as long as we get him into the playoffs, we have a chance. I would advise against that strategy. I think next year sets up perfectly for them to kind of take a gap year, right? Like shed a bunch of salary. Right now they're $44 million over the cap. Shed some salary. Get younger. Don't think about the playoffs as a goal. If you luck into that, whatever, that's great. But take a year off, reset your cap, reset the roster so that you could have this next wave in 2027 and 2028 to compete, because this team wasn't close to competing for a Super Bowl this year, and they're certainly not going to do it next year. So pick the avenue that gives you the best chance for long-term success, and that's by taking a gap year.
100%. This team cannot have their foot in both doorways. You either need to decide to get younger, get better, take the downtime, or to try to keep pushing forward right now. They can't miss the forest for the trees right now, because this team is not in a good situation. I think that I think it's only going to get worse, Marcus, if they don't try to kind of reset here. They're going to have Mahomes for plenty long enough. He's still got a bright future ahead of him, even with the ACL, LCL tear. He's going to come back, take the downtime, get your cap situation right, get rid of some of your older players. I want to see more roster turnover. They've got talent gaps that they need to fill on that team. I agree with you 100% right there. If you love football talk, you're in the right place. This is Stacking the Box, powered by FanSided, where fans share their passion every day. Got a couple more here, Marcus. The Minnesota Vikings, a team that shocked the world by going 14-3 last year. And we're really close. I mean, one game, the season finale game against the Lions, that swings the other way. We might be talking about them in a completely different way. Maybe they've got a different quarterback playing for them right now. Like we question whether it was the right decision to let Sam Darnold walk in free agency this year. And Darnold, to his credit, had another phenomenal season with the Seattle Seahawks. JJ McCarthy has been, better recently, but man, did he really look like a guy that had no business being on a football field, just looked like a backyard football player slinging it out there. Is the goal now, Marcus, to just move forward with McCarthy? Because I think he's shown a lot more in recent weeks. The tools are clearly there. What's the biggest thing the Vikings need to do, the biggest decision they can make in 2026?
Yeah, I think it's making sure that McCarthy is the right guy. Are they interested in some of these other bridge quarterbacks? Do they go out and see if they can get Tua on the cheap or Kyler on the cheap and try to upgrade there? Or are they fully committing to JJ McCarthy? If the answer is yes, I think one of the most important things they've got to do is fix this run game. They went out and they signed or traded for Jordan Mason this offseason. He's been fine. Aaron Jones is fine, but he's getting older. The offensive line has had a lot of injuries. Now they've went out and they signed guys like Will Fries and Ryan Kelly, and they've been okay. Kelly's dealt with some concussions. Christian Darrisaw has not played a lot, but try to fix this run game so you're not asking JJ McCarthy to drop back and throw the ball 30 times. I still really have a lot of hopes for this Minnesota team long term, but unless they fully commit to McCarthy, it's going to be hard to buy into them.
Their biggest decision, Marcus, the biggest thing that they need to do in 2026 is just find out if McCarthy is that guy. And again, you talked about he basically has those weapons at his disposal already, but there should be no bigger goal than saying this is our guy or it's not. You can't not know after the 2026 season. And if you're in limbo at that point, then the answer is probably not. He's probably not the guy. You need to find out right away because this will be years. You'll be going into year 3 of McCarthy. I know he basically had that red shirt first season because of the injury there, but you need to know whether he is that guy and to make sure that he's got every opportunity to succeed. If you can do that, there's not, again, in football, there's nothing more important than finding a franchise quarterback, making sure that he is that guy 100%. That is where the Vikings stand right now. And Marcus, we will wrap up with your Dallas Cowboys, Marcus, and they fought back. They had a pretty good season overall in the second half of the year. Too little, too late. Did some really nice things along the defensive line with the additions, Kenny Clark, and
Quinn Williams.
Me right now.
Quinn Williams. Yeah.
And they got a lot tougher in terms of the run defense. But I think the problem with the Cowboys, Marcus, we still have some major roster gaps on this team right now. If you're Dallas, knowing that you've got Dak now in his 30s, are you looking for quick fix solutions to these problems so that you can get right on top again in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I think linebackers, obviously their biggest need on defense. They could also use the pass rusher, but none of it's going to matter if you don't have the right defensive coordinator. And I think Philadelphia is a really good example of this. They had in 2023, they were 10-1, I believe, at one point. Sean Diassi was their defensive coordinator, and they fell apart down the stretch. They ended up being the 30th ranked defense in the league. They draft Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell with back-to-back picks. They hire Vic Fangio, and in 1 year, they go from 30th in the NFL to second in points per game with just those 3 moves. The Cowboys have 2 first-round picks. They've got cap space. I feel pretty good that they're going to be able to get an edge rusher and a linebacker in the draft. They'll probably get a corner in free agency. But if you bring back Matt Eberflus, I don't know how much of it's going to matter. So I think their most important decision they're going to make this offseason, do they bring back Matt Eberflus? If the answer is no, who do you get to replace him? And can that guy get this defense to play at an average level? I think building your defense from bad to average is actually fairly easy in the NFL. A lot of it is just based on who you play and if you can stay healthy. I think they can do it, but you've got to have the right guy calling plays.
Marcus, the Cowboys situation reminds me so much of where the Lions were a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at that draft, and I liked the players they drafted. I just didn't like the value of the players because they were at non-money 5 positions. I mean, they drafted a running back, a linebacker, a safety, and a tight end with having elite draft capital that year, but they struck on all those players. It made their roster much better. And what they get, 13 wins that season as a result, and were a threat to go to the Super Bowl. Like, that's kind of how I feel about the Cowboys, where they need a linebacker overhaul. They need safety. Maybe this will be the year where Cowboys kind of ignore those money positions, fill those gaps. You know that you've got a couple prime years left of Dak Prescott. Now is that window to capitalize. I think their decisions in the draft to fix some of their biggest roster holes, to make win now moves, that could be enough in itself to get them over the hump. And so I agree with Eberflus. Don't know if he's the guy, but maybe that might even be more important to try to make sure that you're competitive right now. And the Eagles are going downhill a little bit too.
Also, it's a really good draft for linebackers and safeties and defensive linemen. So the draft is going to be very favorable to them. Still got to make the right picks, but more importantly, you've got to get the right defensive coordinator in place.
And typically I am against that philosophy, but I do think there are exceptions to that. Cowboys have their quarterback in place, their offensive line, they've got weapons. They only have a select amount of holes. And so maybe this would be the year that Cowboys could do something similar, kind of like the Lions did. All right. This is Stacking the Box, a show that premieres every single Tuesday evening. Be sure to check it out. You can follow Marcus on X at Marcus_Mosher. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Stack in the Box podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out on YouTube. You can follow my written content on stillcurtain.com. You can check out Marcus's written content on the FanSided NFL Network. Be sure to check out fansided.com for all your daily sports news and opinions. And thanks again for listening to the Stacking the Box podcast.